when you got this cost evaluation thing and you've got a customer coming to you and saying, "Hey, I was just given a directive by our C-level person to say, hey, I got to get to the cloud, right? And all I've got here is a whole bunch of virtual machines, but they're telling me I have to go to the cloud and I'm not sure where to start."
Well, I think we got started by talking about this whole thing where, the enterprises now are looking to save money. And they are trying to think about how to be more efficient, where before the easy button was just throw it up in the hyperscale and life will be great. And now
Mhm.
they're starting to realize that either they grew and that workload is getting larger and it's costing a lot more money, or after they got everything moved there, the what they thought the cost was going to be was actually very different from what it really is.
Mhm.
And so now they're people are starting to consider all of the options, all the tools in the toolbox, where they look at a data center provider like DataBank that has both co-location, private cloud, infrastructure as a service, disaster recovery as a service, and connectivity to hyperscalers. And they're starting to say, look, let's look at this workload and where should it be. And workload isn't really just about cost of workload. It's about the compliance of workload. It's about the location of workload. It's about the security of that workload, and then ultimately, and then cost of workload. And all three of those things need to line up today. But most importantly, what good looks like is to have an infrastructure and have a provider that can span all of those buckets. So, I think that's what's been interesting for me when talking to a lot of our prospects, just about what are we trying to do, and let's look at the tools in the toolbox with regard to our capabilities versus what they're doing today.
Of course, and then you got to get them to consider all of the other pieces of this. If you just have a bunch of VMs and you want to move to the cloud, right, then you're just consuming a whole bunch of, well, I guess it depends on which cloud you're going to. But if you go into a public cloud, you're going to consume a whole bunch of very expensive resource, right? Without developing specifically for a particular platform, which also has its pluses and minuses, right? When you start to natively code yourself against a particular provider.
Well, I think that's another good question, right? Are we just moving static workloads to a hyperscale cloud, or are we actually coding specifically for it, right? And so
Mm.
both those things can be, are important, but what are we trying to do?
In that same conversation, what was interesting is John says to me, "Hey, my boss wants to go to the cloud because he says you don't get fired by going to AWS and it's going to be more secure." And it made me chuckle just a little bit. What do you think about that? Because I was going to answer it for, is it more secure? Is it really?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? I mean, when you look at the hyperscale cloud, I mean, certainly there are tools in their toolbox to help you be more secure, but the idea is that it's all you. Like, you have to figure all that out. You have to integrate all of it. There's no extension of your team. There's no partnership. They're a vendor, and you buy resources on their cloud and you self-orchestrate and you pull it all together. It's very different from your traditional kind of it's very different from your CSP, where you can create that relationship like a data bank. And I think people do have that concept of who's got more money to keep me safe than a hyperscaler, except who's the biggest target on the planet besides a hyperscaler. So I think you have to weigh both of those things. And if you have a massive team and you have really good talent on staff, well, then maybe you can get by doing that. But they are just a vendor, and there is no one to call, and there is no there's just a bunch of tools in the toolbox that they allow you to rent and to use at your own best effort.
Right. And I mean, ultimately, security is really it's a service, right? There's people involved, and for the most part, your people are your biggest security holes.
Well,
No matter how many things you throw against it in terms of security tools, ultimately you have to look at them. You have to review those reports, and you have to make sure that everything's updated and patched, and so on and so forth, which is not exactly what hyperscalers do anyway,
Well,
right?
I also think we have to consider what your talents are, right? If you have talent on staff, that's one thing. But the vast majority of the people that we talk to, they're really looking for a partner that can help them with this stuff, that to be the easy button, especially when we start to get up into more complicated compliances like FedRAMP and CMMC. These things are difficult. They are burdensome, and there is a very specific talent needed to be able to navigate those waters in a way that gets you there quickly and at the lowest possible cost. And I think that's where the hey, we're going to build it ourselves mentality doesn't necessarily create very much efficiency. And that's where a data bank can really help, as we come up, as we do more and more for these customers, particularly on our platform as a service, uh, where we can get to nearly 80% of FedRAMP compliance, and again, allow them to inherit that easy button. So I think that's a really good example where DataBank can help and create tremendous value, and most importantly, be a good partner um, with regard to compliance. Anybody can just go buy, file integrity monitoring and log offloading and internal external vulnerability scanning. I mean, you're sure, are they going to foot the entire build themselves because they're not doing it at scale? That's one thing. But what about like when when you have an issue, or what about when those alarms go off, or what about just how to read the output of that stuff? Like, you have to have a very specific person to do that, and that's where DataBank has two SecOps teams. We have a CISO. We have really sophisticated systems that use AI that watch what's going on in real time across all those customers that subscribe to those services, and so by doing it at scale, we can not only provide a much better experience, we can provide better visibility through our portal, but then we also can really help to ensure that your audits are going to go well by being that good partner, that extension of your team at the lowest possible cost.
Yeah. And you know what? I didn't put it so eloquently when I responded to John about the security. But I did tell him, ultimately it's not a B or C style choice. It needs to be an a la carte shopping bag of security tools and services that you can all logically stack up and put together, right, to make this thing happen. And you kind of
Well,
need the expertise, right, to
Well, that's
run it.
right. There is no bucket A, B, or C. It's about being an extension of the team and doing what is, what is efficient for you. We want to do everything that you don't want to do. We want to fill in the gaps that you don't do today, or we want to augment what you do today that is costing you more and performing in a way that is not up to your expectation. So it's about being that easy button, but most importantly, that partner.
Yeah. No, totally. And then one other thing that came up, right, is if you try to lift and shift something that big. I mean, John's got 400 VMs, you know him well, and he's trying to lift and shift the stuff out. Um, and when you talk about integrating it all into those systems, and is it going to be really compatible? I mean, compute's compute, right? So you think it's compatible. Um, Localizing it properly, making sure it's there, and ultimately protecting it, right? And then putting DR around it. Um, those pieces become fairly difficult, I think, for enterprise level folks who haven't dabbled in cloud. And just saying I want to get to the cloud, good statement, but you kind of need to take some baby steps around that, is my thought. And that's kind of what I've explained. You want to start out with, you want to get to the cloud, which is basically somebody else's compute. Let's start with nice and simple stuff. Lift and shift what you can. If there are any applications that you can utilize as a SaaS model, that's probably a really easy way to say you're in the cloud and move that workload there. Ultimately, if you've got a development team and you want to develop a new product on top of somebody else's natively coded compute, power to you. That's another way to go. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be a collection of all of that working together.
Well, and I think that's one of our superpowers, right? I mean, we're not just a CSP. The ability to own 74 data centers and have five massive clouds throughout our footprint here in the U.S., and then be able to go up the stack, whether it's infrastructure as a service in a multi-tenant or dedicated way, or platform as a service as a multi-tenant or dedicated way, disaster recovery, backup as a service, storage as a service. These are all tools that then we can leverage the other pieces of our business, like our implementations team and our migrations team, and the these added people that allow us to really lower the risk in moving to cloud, right? Because it is a big job. You say that 400 servers, that's a big job, right? And so you need to be with somebody that understands how to do that. And sometimes just an IT team, they've got a day job also, right? It's not, moving 400 servers is not just something you do on the weekend for one weekend. There's a whole
Mhm.
process and plan that has to be put together. And I think that's where DataBank really shines when it comes to getting into the trenches and understanding exactly what's going on in your infrastructure. Uh, I think that's where we can really do good work and lower the risk in your cloud migration plan.
Yeah, and then also let's not forget to mention, when you go with someone like us who has that extreme ownership, right? And John was asking, well, how do you? Because I told him, hey, we offer 100% SLA on our stuff, and he was like, oh, everybody says they can do 100% SLA, right? How do you guys do it? And I wanted to tell him, hey, why don't you sit in front of Scott for a second? We'll tell you all about it. Uh,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's straightforward. We own it all. So there's no third party, right? We own everything. We own the dirt the buildings sit in. We own the cloud infrastructure. We employ all the people from a physical standpoint, from a security operations standpoint. We blend the internet. We do every piece of that solution. And so the idea of us being able to support it at a very, very high level is paramount to us. And you think about it, it's like we offer 100% SLA, but people don't want to pay out on an SLA. They just don't want any problems. And so owning and operating it and having that level of expertise in-house and having no carve-outs for third parties that could essentially cause trouble allows us to provide a very high level of service that people can count on.
Ultimately, it also comes down to support, right? Because he was saying, well, I heard they got great support, and I said, look, pick up the phone and give them a call, right, and see where that gets you. And you're probably going to get to talk to a solutions engineer at some point. But ultimately, I said, when you call us, you're going to talk to an engineer, somebody who's
Yeah,
touching your stuff right away.
I think also if you really think about what DataBank has really spent a lot of time, energy, and money since we started in 2005, right? Is really around the beginnings. Even in our very humble beginnings, we started down a journey with this portal system, and the idea behind the portal is really to be that extension of allow us to be that really good partner. And so what I mean by that is it's this API between our two businesses that allow tremendous transparency and accountability so customers can see everything. They can see, all the way up into how much bandwidth they're using on every single protocol to every single destination on the internet. They can see, all of their virtual machines. They can manage, all of their access listing. They can see, from a colo standpoint, they can see how much power they're drawing on every single circuit for hybrid environments. There's just a lot of visibility into it. There's really easy ways to communicate with DataBank there. And the idea is to be in that boat with them as an extension of their team. We are a fantastic partner. We're not a vendor.
Yeah.
And that's how we've built all of our systems, and that's how we drive our support people to make our customers feel is that we work for them.
Yeah. And talking about lifting and shifting that much workload, I didn't have much time at that point to describe this, but I really wanted to tell him about the implementations team. And Rob Seeley, who's our director of implementations. I mean, this guy's a migrations guru. That would have been a good introduction, I think, at that point.
He creates more comfort than anybody else in DataBank with regard to a new customer, because I think the biggest risk to anybody moving to the cloud is, how am I going to do it? How am I going to move all this stuff that is in flight today and move it to some other place without crashing the plane, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what his team does. I think last year we did 635 moves, and we can do app level migrations. We can do virtual slice migrations. We use a partner to do physical migrations. So we can do all of it. And how I like to kind of present it is we can do all of it, we can do none of it, or we can do everything that customers aren't comfortable doing, but we can
Mhm.
consult in every piece of it. So I think that that creates tremendous comfort. It helps to alleviate any anxiety as far as what is the plan to move, and ultimately helps our customers be successful in their mission. And look, I remember he does have a workload in AWS, and we were talking about, what is the cost of that, and should it be there? And in some cases, in some cases it makes sense to have stuff there. We have that other customer we're talking about that we're talking to right now. That is, they burst into AWS, but the
Mhm.
majority of their stuff will run on our infrastructure because, from a cost standpoint, the private cloud that we're going to build for them is 30% less expensive for the same workload. But private clouds don't generally burst all that well for seasonal workloads, so they're going to be able to burst into these hyperscales for, the 3 months out of the year that they need that extra capacity.
Yeah.
And so, and oh, by the way, don't forget they have an AS400, right? So they have an AS400 that runs their POS system on the back end and their inventory
Mhm.
system on the back end. So we're co-locating that. We're providing a big managed cloud for their steady state workload, and then they're bursting into AWS for the dynamic workload. And so, lots of good tools in the toolbox, lots of good talent to be able to make those things happen. And we're considering, again, the things that are important to enterprises these days, which is the cost of workload, the compliance of that workload, and the location of that workload.
For sure. Right. And then that was kind of the end of my conversation where I told him, look, I believe in, and we believe in the right workload on the right infrastructure, right? We don't have to be the only part of that solution. We want to be designed in a way that we're hybrid and working with everything that makes sense, right, to their ultimate mission.